first Indian speaker to get an opportunity to speak in Laracon EU. And she's the master of design. And every time we talk, it's more about, even if you have noticed, her introduction video was also more about designs only. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please welcome Shruti on stage, one of our esteemed, proud Indian speaker from Bengaluru.
Thank you.
Let's welcome Shruti with big round of applause, the only speaker.
Wherever I go, there's something different about me and everyone else is in the other direction. So it had to happen at Laracon as well. I think mine is the only front-end talk in a conference full of back-end talks. But yeah, that's what makes me special and you'll remember me better. So I'm Shruti Balasa. I'm a tech educator from Bangalore. I create courses, I write ebooks, and I have a YouTube channel. I have a couple of courses on LinkedIn Learning and a couple on Laracast as well. Again, two of them are with respect to Laravel and two with respect to CSS. I'm also currently building a super simple website builder, not for developers, for somebody who don't know how to create websites, but it's going to be extremely simple for them, with a co-founder, Patricio. So the brand is VoxPop. Hopefully the alpha will be out in about a couple of months. So all of this I do in my part-time because I do have a full-time job, and that is this. My 6-year-old kid, he takes me on a ride every day. I mean, in life, you know. It's fun parenting him. Do you all agree it's a full-time job? Yeah. So, responsive web design. He doesn't want to go out of the screen. Yeah. So, responsive design. It's one of the things that Tailwind makes easy in CSS, right? How many of you agree CSS is hard? How many of you find CSS hard? Come on, I think I should see more hands. Those of you who are not raising your hands, you're going to come and center a div right now. Okay. So CSS is hard, but I have spoken to a lot of people, and they say that Tailwind at least makes it slightly better for them. They're able to design something decent because of Tailwind. And one of the aspects that gets really simple is because you don't have to manually write media queries like this and repeat the selectors each time just to probably change a font size. We are all used to this now, right? Just add one of those 5 responsive variants like SM, MD, LG, XL, and then put whatever styles you want, and you have a completely responsive web page. But because it is so simple, it's easy to think that this is it. I mean, what's more in that? What is there to talk about for 30 minutes in responsive web design? It's become easy now, right? But trust me, there is a lot more to it. And this talk is all about talking what's beyond these simple responsive variants. To start with, I want to talk about the available responsive variants first, even before we go into the new CSS features or how else you can make things responsive, right? First one is the max width responsive variants. This is the simplest one I'm starting with. I'll show you an example. Here's a typical minified hero section of a web page, right? Of course, there's a lot more going on, but this is the simplified version. You usually have a heading, a paragraph, and 2 buttons, one primary and one secondary. So as you can see on the larger screen, this is how the buttons would appear, one next to the other. But on mobile screens, they would come one below the other. So naturally, this is how we would write it. So we'll say, we'll wrap it in a div, and we'll use flexbox. So we say flex, and then since we are developing mobile first in Tailwind, we'll have to add the styles for the mobile screens first. So we change the direction to flex column, that is flex col, and then when we go for larger screens, maybe we add an SM breakpoint and say flex row. This is one of the things. And for each of the links, if you observe, on larger screens, they occupy only as much space as required. But for mobile screens, they occupy the full width. So here again, for the links, what we would do is we would say flex we would say W full for mobile screens, and then after SM breakpoint, we say W auto. So if you notice something, what we are doing is we are setting the some styles for mobile screens, and we are actually undoing them after SM breakpoint. If you observe, the default direction is flex row, and the default width is auto. But only for mobile screens, we are having them to set, and at a later breakpoint, we're undoing it. So when you have scenarios like this, where you're targeting something other than default only for the mobile screens, you can simply replace this flex call SM flex row, that is 2 utility classes, into a single utility class, which is max SM, that is you're targeting devices only up to SM breakpoint. So it's from 0 to SM, that is the max width responsive variant. You can say max SM flex call, and anyway for every other screen size, it's going to be the default flex row. So even for the links, we can replace it 2 utility classes with a single one saying max SM W full. You might think it was just 6 utility classes and now we have 3, but imagine how many such scenarios are there. Of course, don't replace everything with max width. Only for these scenarios where you're having to undo a default style for a larger screen, use these, and a number of your CSS lines will also be reduced. The next one is about stacking responsive variants. Here again, I have an example. So assume these are a set of services or maybe features of a website, of a tool or something, and this is how they get listed in the mobile, maybe a grid with one single column. But the moment you go a little wider, maybe a small desktop or something, you'll be able to see 2 columns. But somewhere in between, like a tablet size or something, it's too small to display 2 columns, but then again it's too wide to display one single column. It looks a little too wide. At this screen size, maybe a range of 200 pixels, somewhere in between, you might want to restrict the width for some reasons. This is a very simple layout, but you can imagine for readability purposes, somewhere in between 2 breakpoints, you might want to just make it, limit the width. So once again, the way we would do it is we would say after SM breakpoint, like where we want to limit the width, we'd say max width XL. That's one of the very useful Tailwind CSS class. And then a little later, maybe after MD, we would undo it or say max width none. So take up all the space that you want. So here again, we're doing the same thing. We are setting a utility class, and at a later breakpoint, we are undoing it only for 200 pixels or something. Instead, we can combine these two and make it SM stack the variant, that is SM up to MD between those 2 breakpoints. Only for that range of screens, you can set the max width XL, right? This combines 2 utility classes into one, and especially when you're using some prettier plugin where SM breakpoints are all stacked together and then max MD is somewhere else, you won't know what's happening. If it's together, it's really helpful. So that's how, this is what Tailwind does, and this is the CSS you get. So you will easily know that for this range of breakpoints, this is the style. So next, we are going to, so there's another thing that you can do. So if the available breakpoint is, if there is no available breakpoint for the screen size that you want to target, you can use arbitrary variants like this. So you can say max 600 pixels. Just for a one-off thing. You might not need it for every single layout, but if you need it just once or twice, you can use arbitrary values like this. You can even use arbitrary values instead of SM, but you will have to use the min keyword. You can't just put 400 pixels in the bracket and expect it to work. The min keyword is very important here. So min 400, max 600, this is the style. Pretty much readable. So if you just need it once, this is the best way to use it. So, multi-column layouts. So columns have been around for quite a while, but it's one of the most underrated features. It's not used much. It's very easy compared to Flexbox or Grid, and it does have its own use cases. So let's look at another example for this. Assume you have a website for books, right? Maybe a particular book, and you want to list all the testimonials or reviews that people have given. In a scenario like this, it really doesn't matter what order the testimonials available, are visible in. It could go from right to left or bottom to top and then move into the next column. For such cases, it looks like a Flexbox case, or it looks like you can easily use Grid for this, but notice it's not a grid layout. It's not a 3x2 grid for sure, right? You can see that the last row, it's not leveled with the other two rows. So this is not a grid layout for sure. So how do we do this with columns? There's a simple utility class that you can use. If you simply say columns 3 and you put in as many testimonials you want, it'll make sure that those columns are almost level, right? So you put maybe 10 testimonials and they're all arranged, balanced in those 3 columns as much as possible, just like a newspaper article. So here, if you want to make this responsive, what you would do is you would say columns 1, and then SM columns 2, LG columns 3, or something like that. So you'd say, what's the difference? In Grid also, we do the same thing, right? What's the benefit of using columns? The benefit is that if you don't want to mention the number of columns for each screen size, you can simply say column XS, column 2XS, column LG, MD. These are something like t-shirt sizes. So where column 2XS is 288 pixels. So what this does is it tries to make sure that each column is about 288 pixels. So if it's able to fit more columns in that screen size, it will do, otherwise it will not. So something like this is extremely useful because with one single utility class, you can add as many children as possible, and this is what you will get. It's just that one utility class, and for mobile screen, you have 1 column. For slightly larger ones, you have 2, and then it's able to fit 1 more here, so it fits in another column. It's also balanced, if you observe. All right, so that's about the columns. And then let's move on to the next. Great. Oh, right. So this is something I forgot to mention. This is the order that it follows. If you notice, when you use the column layout, it fills the first column first, and then goes into the second column, and then goes into the third column. That's why I said if the order in the way the items appear doesn't matter, because the second item doesn't appear to the right. The second item appears in row 2. If that's not a problem for you, then you can use columns. Otherwise, we have our very good friend, which is grid columns, using the autofit keyword. I don't know how many of you have used it or how many of you are aware of it. It's not available by default in Tailwind, but we can use it. Let me show you what it does and then how to do it. So I'll take the exact same example once again, but here I'm using the grid layout. So you can see it's not exactly stacked like columns, but it still looks good. It's in a grid layout, and we have 6 testimonials in a 3x2 grid. So how we would do this is we would say, display grid, and then grid calls 1. This is something you already know. SM grid calls 2, LG grid calls 3. But if we have to achieve the same, way we did with columns, that we specify a width, it would be awesome, right? You just specify a width and make sure that as many columns as possible, the browser will automatically fit it. It's possible in regular CSS, of course, but there is no ready utility class for that in Tailwind. You can use arbitrary values, and it becomes this. Absolutely unreadable and very difficult to write and get it correct in the first go. So let me break it down for you in CSS. So what we are doing is, grid template columns is the CSS property that you use for any number of columns. And the value is, we use the repeat function here. The repeat function in CSS takes 2 parameters. The first one is the number of columns that you want to repeat, because we have grid template columns. If you have grid template rows, then it's the number of rows that you want. Here, repeat, the first parameter will be the number of columns you need, But that's what we don't know. We want to tell the browser, fit as many as you can. So the keyword you use here is autofit. So you say autofit as many columns as you can. And the second parameter will be the width of each column that we want to say. And here, we won't simply say 16 rem or 18 rem, because then it will be exactly that width. It will not flow. So it'll be OK for some screen sizes and not for the others. So here we use the min-max function. And we say, let the column be a minimum of 18 rem. Let it not go smaller than that. And the maximum is 1 FR. That means distribute that equally among all the columns. That's why you get equidistant columns, minimum of 18 rem. So now you understand this value better, and that's exactly what goes in the arbitrary value. But when we remove all the spaces, it's difficult. Again, it's OK if you already know CSS, if you know how to use repeat, when to use, and everything, it's easier to achieve. But if not, there is a plugin that I have created to make this easy, and that is Tailwind Grid Autofit. So this is a plugin that you can easily install in any of your Tailwind projects. So you simply use the npm command to install, and then you add this require statement within your plugins in your config file. So only 2 steps, and that's it. You will be able to use this utility class called Grid Autofit. That's the single class which you can use that will give you this CSS rule, which makes sure that you get columns of at least 16 rem width, and that's a simple CSS class. But what if you need wider columns or smaller columns? Obviously, there are some options that you can use. You can say grid autofit XS. XS is maybe 12 rem. SM is 14 rem. You can check the documentation. If you just want simple columns, you can just say grid autofit, and then add as many children as you want there. You don't have to define how many columns you want for each screen size. Easy, right? And you can also use arbitrary values using this plugin. So if you want a very odd size, like 13.5 rem or 19.8 rem, whatever, then you can put those values also. So now, if I simply use grid autofit utility class, this is what I get. You can see that each column is at least 16 rem wide. Obviously, you can choose the size that you want. Perfect. So the next most important topic right here is container queries. How many of you have heard about CSS container queries? OK, very few hands. Great. So I get to enlighten you about this new feature. This is a new CSS feature which has gained browser support widely now, very recently, and it's also available in Tailwind as a first-party plugin. So I'll explain why you would need container queries first. Assume this is a card, maybe a subscribe box that you might want to add in your blog or somewhere in your website, asking people to subscribe to your newsletter. And if you want to add it in your main section, this is how you want it to appear. Maybe the headline, and then the subtitle, and then followed by the form, which is also everything in one single row. It's very short and concise. But let's say you want to add a quote on the left, and then add the subscribe box. Then notice that the heading and subtitle come on top, and then comes the form, but even the form is still in one single row. What if you want to add the subscribe box on the sidebar, right, where you probably list all the archives and things like that in your blog? This time, the subtitle is missing because you want to keep it as short as possible, and the form input and the submit button have come one below the other. The way we would write each of these components normally is, if you want a very small box, then we would add a flex call to the form itself, because it's one below the other, and to the entire div itself, we would add flex call, because we want the paragraph and subtitle and the form to come one below the other. So this is how you would do and also you would hide the subtitles by saying class hidden. For slightly wider one, you would remove the flex call from the form, but still keep it at the parent. And for the extremely wide one, you would remove the hidden also. And for the extremely wide one, you would remove the flex call on the top div also. So as you can see, the entire markup itself is different. So how will you reuse a component like this? If you want to create a blade component and then use it wherever you want, you won't be able to do that unless you're passing some additional attributes and using if directives and saying that if it's a narrow one, then add this class, otherwise you don't. You'll need conditional classes, and it's all a mess. But with container queries, you don't have to do that. The way media queries can query the entire viewport and give you different styles, container queries can do that based on the parent container. So very easily, I will explain how this can be done in Tailwind. So you have the subscribe box here. The first thing you need to do is wrap it in another div, that is a parent container. So wherever you place it, based on that container's width, the size, you'll be able to change some styles. So the first class you need to add is @container. So you're saying, this is my container. Whatever is the width, based on that, you please change the styles. So based on @container, now, this will set the CSS rule, which is container type inline size. You don't have to worry about it because this is what you would usually need to do. This is taken care of by Tailwind by us. You simply add @container. And now to your form, you can, for mobile screens, you will, not mobile screens, for smaller boxes, you will say flex call. But for slightly larger box, now you can use @lg and then change the utility class. So notice it's not simply lg, because if you simply add lg, that will be media queries. The moment you add this is a container query. As you can see, the CSS, it says @container, not @media. It says @container and width, so and so, and you're able to change the style. Similarly, you can, so there are these many available container sizes, starting from XS up to 7XL. You can obviously add your own value, like something you want, something smaller than 320 pixels there. You can add another value in your config file. In the key containers, you can define your own additional styles as well. Sorry, additional widths. So this becomes LG flex row. And you can do the same thing for the parent, the wrapper div as well. You can say flex call, and for a much wider container, you can say 3XL flex row. And now you can even show the subtitle. You can first hide it. And for larger screens, you can say LG block. And that's it. This entire markup is the same. It doesn't have to, you don't have to use conditional classes. You can simply put this wherever you want, in your sidebar, in your main section, wherever you want, without worrying where it's going. It's a single blade component. Add it, put it in any size, and it'll be able to work. Yeah, but what if you need nested containers? So let's say you have a pretty complicated component where it's very critical to show certain elements in certain sizes, but maybe hide them otherwise. So let's say based on the size of the form, that is, you want to make the form another container, and based on that size, you want to change the font size of your button. Something like this. You say @container to the form, and then you say @XL text LG. But now it's ambiguous. You don't know which container size is that button referring to. By default, it picks the closest container, but what if you want to change the styles based on that parent container? Because for this, you can add names to your containers. So let's say you can call your parent container main or something like that, and you can call the other container form. You can simply give it any name you want. And now, based on that, you can say @XL/form if you want to refer to the form, or you can refer to the main by using @XL/main and change the styles according to whichever container you want. So currently, Tailwind doesn't have container queries in the core. It has to be installed as a plugin, but it is a first-party plugin maintained by them, so you can do the same thing, install the plugin and then require it in your config file. But the good news is, in the Tailwind version 4, that's going to be released in June maybe, the alpha is already out if you know about it, you can already start using container queries. It's a part of the core. So the last point that I'd like to talk about is dynamic viewport units. This is also pretty new in CSS. So if you're not very updated, you might have missed out on this. So normally we all like to create full screen layouts, right? Especially the hero section. We might add a very nice background image or a gradient, and we want that section to take up the full screen. So what do? We usually add it to the body itself, or we add it to the hero section and we say min height screen. So the CSS for this is it sets the minimum height to at least 100 viewport height. So what is this VH? It is the viewport height. It picks up the height of the viewport, the screen or whatever, and it is at least that height. This works great for all the desktops, but our mobiles have a small problem. There is this menu bar and the browser bar that you see on the top. It's the URL bar, and then there are some icons at the bottom. Now this takes up some space when you open the website, but the moment you start scrolling, then it's gone. So that means the height is not static. It keeps varying, and especially when you open the screen, the height is full. Okay, when you say min height screen, you're assuming that the entire screen is visible, but the bottom icons are actually overlapping on top of it. So that's why you're not able to see that message. You can only read something very important, and then you'll have to actually scroll to read that message. Imagine if those are your buttons, like you want to create a view which resembles an app. You will naturally add your icons there, and this is a very bad experience. So, by the way, this demo is not from me, it's from Kevin Powell. So if you want to understand this in a better way, you can watch his YouTube video. I just picked it up because it was so good to explain. So now, instead of using VH, there are some new viewport units available. Those are SVH, LVH, and DVH. That means the smaller viewport, the longer viewport, and dynamic. So let me explain that with the screen. This image is again from Ahmad Shadid, not mine. So the length that you can see in the first screen, that is the small viewport. So when you define units SVH instead of VH, you'll get only that, the one that is visible without the bottom bar. But if you, for some reason, want the entire height, then you can use LVH. But if you want it to vary, if you want the dynamic height, like sometimes whenever it's small, you want small, whenever you want entire thing is visible, you want large, you can use DVH. So people have started to think, hey, DVH is now available, that's what I need, right? So let me just simply change min height screen to min height DVH instead, and that will solve all my problems. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you use DVH. It looks good, it looks great to begin with. Yes, the important message is available. But what happens when you start scrolling? The moment you start scrolling, notice how the background image suddenly expands, and then let's say you scroll down, you scroll up, you're able to see that small glitch. It doesn't feel very smooth because the viewport height is now varying. It's dynamic. This is what you chose. This works perfectly fine for, this is the best option if you have some menu icons at the bottom. Then it's all the time visible to you, so it's great. But if you want to use the VH, that is, if you are simply using this feature for full screen layouts, then don't use DVH. This is not the best option for the experience that you want. Then it's better to go for SVH. Because when you use SVH, the moment the person opens your web page, it will anyway be visible. And once you scroll, it doesn't change. You see? It's so smooth. So it looks like it's a full screen layout, and nothing shifts in the layout. So it's a very good experience, which is what even you want to give, right? So I think that's about it. Yeah, that's a wrap. I hope I covered some things that you were not aware of. I'm sorry if so many of you got bored because you're not into front end, you're not into Tailwind. I still hope you learned something. And tomorrow if you see in a web app or something developed by your team, your front end, and if you see that your layout is switching, you can say, hey, are you using DVH? You can use SVH. You know, it'll be a smooth flow. And they'll be like, where did you learn that from? So I hope it helps. And this is my YouTube channel. If you like the way I presented, you might love some of my videos. If you ever get into Tailwind, if you're not in Tailwind, and if you get into Tailwind, I have some extremely good videos covering a lot of topics. I am very close to 12,000 subscribers. I think I'm 20 short. So by the time I leave tomorrow, I hope I reach 12,000 subscribers so I can celebrate with you all. I have a couple of books on Gumroad. The first book is a complete guide to Flexbox and Grid with practical examples that you use in real world. And the second book and video course is about Tailwind. If you know the basics, but you want to level up, this is a good one to go. I have purchased power parity setup. So if you are buying from India, then you already get a 45% discount, flat to begin with. But if you're a student and you want additional discount, totally reach out to me and I'll help you with that. And then I'm most available on Twitter, more than my phone, on call or any other social media. I'm on Twitter. You can find me there, connect to me. But while I'm here, you can talk to me. I will be available after my talk. I was preparing, so since morning you might not have seen me. But now on, you can approach and talk to me about CSS, Tailwind, or anything else that you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. So I have a couple of questions.
Expected?
Before I open Twitter, I have my own question.
Oh, wow.
How does it feel at international stage like Laracon EU representing your country?
It was a very humbling experience. That was always there in my dream list, something that I wanted to check off. You won't believe the moment I landed in Amsterdam at Laracon EU and walked out of the plane, and when I was just holding my suitcase and walking and looking out, I had tears in my eyes because this was a dream come true. So it felt very good to represent India in an international stage, and knowing that I was the first one to do it, I had a lot of pressure. But I hope I did a great job. You were there.
Yeah,
so
of
you
course. So like, how many of you would like to speak at international stage one day? How many of you? So many. So any quick advice, like what can be the best thing or what needs to do? Any advice would you like to give to everyone?
So first thing is you should start local. I have spoken from my college days, I have spoken at a lot of local meetups. So you'll have to first start talking at smaller stages, and that's how it grows. People will obviously recognize you. My first Laracon, what do I say? My first conference as a speaker was at Laracon last year in Ahmedabad. And after that, this is my 4th international level conference already in the last 1 year. Yeah. So it just goes exponentially, but you have to keep doing and believing in yourself until that happens.
Yeah, and I also think you did a couple of meetups for the Laravel community in Bangalore as well.
Yes, yeah, I did
so one piece of advice, we have more than 12, 13 cities where we have ongoing monthly meetups happening. So I would request all of you to speak there. That will boost your confidence, right?
Yes.
So now let me see so many questions. One interesting question. How did you create your presentation?
Yeah, using Keynote in Mac, and I have about 150 slides, but it doesn't look that way. This transition that you see from one slide to another, those are different slides, and I just have to use Magic Move. You might have used that. It took a long time. I can talk to you if you really need to use that.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes a very long time. You need to be in for it.
You need to share some tips, definitely.
I will.
Last question. Is it ideal to use it for large-scale application due to lack of scalability and reusability?
I think they mean, do you I think
Yeah,
they mean Tailwind CSS.
Yeah, Tailwind CSS.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine you have developed a large-scale application and then you want to change one style. You'll have to look up the class name, go to your styles.css or whatever style sheet that is, and then scroll down to that particular thing and change, and then go back to your HTML. If you're adding an additional element, you have to again create a separate name for that, making sure that it's not overlapping with some other class name. And actually, for large-scale applications, a lot of people who use large-scale applications or who develop large-scale applications have said that there's nothing as maintainable as Tailwind. Tailwind is the best. The styles are associated with the markup right there. You don't have to dig into a separate CSS file.
Yeah. And one last question from my side.
Okay.
So I remember that during the time of like 2005, 6, 7, when I used to write a lot of CSS, because that has also been favorite for me. So like specifically for i6, i7, I used to use that important a lot. So is it still in practice? How many of you are using still that important in CSS?
Oh my God.
Yeah, oh, so many.
You don't have to, trust
that
me.
That is still in existence.
It is there. But I feel it has to be used only when you're using some third-party packages where you cannot change the styles directly. But if you use Tailwind, very rarely you use important. That's the first thing you can eliminate absolutely, because all the styles are in the markup. You don't have to override anything.
Yeah. Perfect, Shruti. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Shruti.